Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this discussion about workplace safety and security. While it seems like today, not very many days go by when we don't hear about another incident of violence somewhere in America, the events in Virginia Beach on May 31st struck particularly close to home. First, because they were so close to us in Virginia by geography, but also because the area of the violent attack occurred in a place very similar to one that we come to work in every day. Our discussion this morning will be a format a little bit different than normal. When the county manager normally does his chats, they are of a range of topics that are of interest to you. This morning, we would like to focus the discussion, focus the questions on the topic of safety and security in our workplace. We invite your questions from wherever you are this morning, and we've assembled a team here to answer those questions. With us this morning, County Manager Mark Schwartz, our Director of Human Services, Anita Freeman, our Police Chief, Jay Farr, and our Director of Employee Assistance Programs, Tara Woodridge. I'm Jim Schwartz with the County Manager's Office. We want to open these questions up to you, which we'll do in just a few minutes. But first, we have a little bit of conversation that we want to have here on some general topics. You should prepare your questions by entering them into the chat box that you should see on your screen, and we will get to them very soon. Mark, let's start with you. Why are we doing this morning? What is the interest that you have on the topic of workplace safety and security?
So thanks, Jim. And as everybody should know, I've sent out a couple of messages since May 31st. I think that to put it sort of very directly to people, we tend to spend most of our time during a day in the workplace. And that workplace for us could be the specific building we're in or out in the field. And having a sense of security and safety is extremely important and isn't something that we should take for granted. I did want to just start off by saying one other thing, which is that I have heard from several people since the 31st about their anxiety. And I wanted to let you all know that we've been doing things for a long time to try to improve security and take steps. We have more that we're going to talk about today. And so I welcome your questions on that. And the one thing I wanted to really focus on, we're not just talking about the facility we're in right now, which is the Bosman Government Center. We're talking about all the county facilities where people work and actually when they're out in the field. And I want to make sure that one message, that if I can get something across, is I want people to feel empowered. I want people to feel empowered if they have a question or they see something that they're uncomfortable with. Pick up the phone. Call 911. There's no shame. There should be no waiting, no hitch in doing that. If you have a question, if you see something, say something, pick up, do it, and you just shouldn't even ask. Ask yourself whether you should or you shouldn't. You just should. So that's sort of the answer to the first question.
Chief Farr, why don't you walk us through some of the aspects of safety and security that you and the police department have been focused on. You do work every single day in the community and around our facilities, but obviously Virginia Beach has given new attention that you've been giving to this topic here recently.
So I think it's really important to remember that there's a lot of things that have been going on for some period of time in the county all around security, not only physical security, but how employees are trained to be able to respond to different issues. You'll have an opportunity shortly to get a brief sheet that will come out to everybody as a result of this meeting here today. But a couple things to keep in mind is while I think we have a much more heightened awareness as a result of what happened in Virginia Beach, I think it's really important to remember that some of the core things that I like to reinforce are as relevant today as they've always been. Some of those are around making sure that you, for example, you wear your badge every single day so we know who our fellow employees are. That when you have people that try to come in the building behind you to take an opportunity, it doesn't have to be confrontational, but you can just simply ask, how can I help you today? And maybe at that point in time, direct them to the right area. Other things that are available to you, of course, are what I think it's called See Something, Say Something. This has been a very large program through the Washington metropolitan area, but every time you see something that you think is suspicious or out of place, we encourage you to take the time to call the police department. I know oftentimes they'll get some feedback that, well, we don't want to bother with the police with some minor thing. I can assure you we're out there 24/7. It is a core component of what we do, and I would much prefer that you call us and give us the opportunity to come out and determine that it really is nothing to be worried about versus something that we really need to worry about. The other thing that I think it's important to remember is that it's really about planning on your part and your opportunity as you're sitting in your office today or out on the street or you're doing your job. Take a look at what's available to you, be aware of your surroundings, be aware of what resources are available to you, and take a look at some of the opportunities that the county is going to afford you to be as safe as possible in the workplace. A couple specific things that have changed right after Virginia Beach because there was a much heightened anxiety. The police department, working along with the sheriff's office, is now providing armed officers in Courthouse Plaza, but it doesn't just limit to Courthouse Plaza. We have also authorized the use of off-duty officers to work dedicated to checking places such as the Trade Center, the libraries, and other public and government buildings around the county to give an opportunity for you to see officers out on the street. And I would also take that as an opportunity to talk to that officer if you have questions or concerns, and they can help point you in the right direction.
Good, thank you, Chief. Anita and Tara, I'm wondering if each of you might share some of the resources that are available for our workforce who may be feeling grief or anxiety in the wake of the shootings at Virginia Beach, or specific concerns about their own mental health or that of others in the workplace. Tara, sorry, Anita, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Well, people who feel anxiety should take their feelings seriously and should always feel comfortable approaching a supervisor or the Employee Assistance Program or their human resources point person in their department. It's normal at this time to feel that kind of anxiety, and there should be no shame associated with it. We have a number of trainings that are offered through the county. The particular ones offered through the Department of Human Services are two that I'd like to mention. One is called Mental Health First Aid. It's a 2-day training, and it's offered to anyone in the community who would like to understand more about the signs and symptoms of mental health, particularly anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia. At the Department of Human Services, we have the core services provided for people who are living with behavioral health needs. And so the frequency of folks who have issues related to behavioral health come to our campus over at Sequoia Plaza to receive those services. So we also offer something for employees called TOVA, Therapeutic Options of Virginia, which are some techniques, prevention techniques, first to understand the signs and symptoms of somebody in distress, also using a trauma-informed approach, because many people who come over to the Department of Human Services are experiencing some kind of stress or trauma. So we teach our staff how to be understanding, but also de-escalate wherever necessary in a calm and verbal manner behaviors that may be accelerating during an interaction with a client. Those are just two of the ones that I'd like to mention that are available to staff.
Thank you, Anita. Terry, you want to talk a little bit about what EAP has to offer?
Certainly. The Employee Assistance Program is a free, confidential resource for every employee as well as for retirees. We really like to be proactive in promoting health and well-being. That's emotional, physical, and psychological well-being. So anytime an employee has concerns, they're welcome to call the EAP, make an appointment. Happy to talk with you about your concerns, help you develop a strategy for addressing them, whether it's appropriate to contact a supervisor or human resources, or just work on your personal feelings of anxiety. We're there to assist you. The EAP is located in downtown Clarendon at 2847 Wilson Boulevard. We're across from Whitlow's Restaurant and have free parking, which you access from North Fillmore. So our goal is to provide solution-focused short-term counseling to address a wide variety of concerns, whether they're personal or work-related. As Anita mentioned, some anxiety is normal, particularly when there's been a major incident that impacts our nation. Gavin DeBecker wrote a book called The Gift of Fear, where he talks about the importance of paying attention to your intuition. So if there's something in particular that rises your concern, then we really want you to make sure that you address it either with your supervisor, with HR, or with the EAP, so we can help you address it appropriately.
And in some instances, it doesn't have to be just the employee that's contacting you. The supervisor should see EAP as a resource also.
Absolutely. We are a resource for supervisors as well, for everyone at all levels of the organization. For supervisors, we provide a lot of coaching and consultation around how to manage workplace situations, whether it's a team issue, an individual employee that's concerning, or conflicts between coworkers that need to be resolved before they escalate and create problems for the workplace.
Good, thank you. So we've begun to get some questions from our workforce who's been paying attention here. Our first question comes from Yolanda. She says, I've arrived on a weekend to find doors unsecure or gates completely open. It seems like a good amount of the focus is on the Bosman building. What about the other facilities in the county? Mark, I'm going to turn to you on this because you touched on it in your introductory remarks.
Right, so we have a number of facilities across the county, and we're taking the security issues seriously. One thing that I think Jim may actually be able to speak to in a little bit more detail, we're about to introduce, when I say about to, over the next couple of months, a new badging and protocol system, not just for the Bosman Government Center, but all county facilities. And then similarly, we, as the chief had said, we're taking security steps at all the buildings. And separate from that, the specific circumstance you brought up, if you ever go in and you see something where a door is supposed to be locked and it isn't, immediately contact your supervisor. If it's on a weekend, we're going to have a resource page that we're setting up where all this information will be available. But DES has a watch engineer, which he or she is responsible for all the buildings in the county on a 24/7 basis. Call and say, there's something wrong here, I need somebody to come over and fix it. And that person would do that immediately.
And going back to the original comment about empowering our employees, if somebody came to an unopened door or gate and felt that there was a true security or safety need, they should just dial 911.
Absolutely. If they had a concern that something was going to happen, do not hesitate.
Good, good. We have a question unattributed to, are employees allowed to carry firearms to work? And I will feel empowered to answer that question. Our administrative regulations do prohibit employees from carrying weapons and also prohibit them from being on the property. So you cannot have weapons even in your car in a parking lot somewhere on county property. All right, our next question comes from Big Boss Man. I saw the news reports about how the secured areas actually prevented law enforcement from being able to respond to the active shooter in Virginia Beach. How is the county responding to this? It seems like a huge dilemma. Chief Farr, I'm going to turn that one to you.
Sure. So as I know there's projects underway as the county continues to develop and build out its systems to allow access, the card reader access system for the entire county. However, that's going to take some time to transition for the entire county, so I think it's important for everybody to know out there that in our cruisers, we have a number of sets of breaching equipment that we carry with us 24/7. So if we come across any kind of door that we could not get in through normal means, we do have the immediate capability to force entry into just about any door here in the county.
Okay, our next question is around the issue of security guards. Can the security guards be permitted to carry defensive weapons of some sort if the threat has a weapon, the security guard is another target? I'm not entirely sure how to dissect that, but we are looking at when we bring on security guards here at Bosman, they are intended to be armed. This was part of the project to look at the renovation of the building, and that is a work in progress that is currently being filled by the police department with their details to the building and the patrols that Chief Farr mentioned earlier to other county facilities. Yet to be determined how we still apply those same security measures to other buildings, but it is an area of high attention. Similarly, a question, community centers seem especially vulnerable, and particularly joint use facilities with APS, Arlington Public Schools. What is the plan to protect staff and customers there? Chief, you want to add anything to?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, if I could, I just want to backtrack just a second on Mr. Schwartz's comments around the security. Just so you know, the security that they're looking at here meets all the DCJS, the Department of Criminal Justice certifications. So the quality and the ability of the staff should be extremely competent to handle any emergency situation that would arise here in the county building. As far as the community centers, or whether it's the school programs, the police department works very closely with our partners, both with Arlington Public Schools and with Parks and Recreation, to make sure that when there are events taking place that we have adequate staff up there to provide some level of security. And certainly if we get any indication of any kind of threat matrix, we'll bring in the appropriate amount of resources to address that issue well in advance. So it's really like everything else. It's important that we maintain a very strong partnership with our public and private partners to make sure that any event we go to is well informed.
Mark, I'm going to turn to you for these next, actually, 2 questions, because I think they're very much related. There are times when staff at public meetings encounter passionate community members whose passions sometimes cross over into rudeness. How does staff distinguish between rude and unsafe? And how do we respect people's opinions and viewpoints while still insisting on civil behavior? And then I think perhaps related, there's a follow-on question by someone else that's asking about threatening behavior in the workplace. How do we deal with that? Does someone have to make a direct threat, or is something like displaying pictures of handguns in the workplace enough to cause alarm?
Okay, so I hope I can cover all of this. The first question, this is something I've actually talked about for a couple of years, which is the interactions with the community, and a focus not only from me but from the county board very directly that people should be civil in their discourse. It's okay to disagree, but not be disagreeable when you're going about it. We have an obligation to be polite. We do not have an obligation to put ourselves in peril. And as Tara said, and I think that sometimes you can tell in your gut if there's a problem and to be concerned with your personal safety. At no time do I want any individual county employee to say, well, I just need to sit here and take it. You can get up and exit from the situation. Or, as I said before, if you have a concern, call for help. And I don't want to minimize that. People should feel empowered to do what they have to do to look out for themselves in that situation. At the same time, you know, we do have a customer service initiative, and we're all about being polite and helping people. And so part of the training that we're offering is, in addition to the training that Anita talked about, and this will all be on the resource page, is training for people who often interact with the public about how to handle situations like that, because sometimes it can be just the way you go about answering a question can help diffuse a situation. The second question, which was things that you see in the workplace, for example, seeing pictures of guns, I would say that's a different set. What you should do about that is you should immediately, if you have a concern, immediately go to your supervisor, and that he or she will make it known to either the police or human resources. And I think that requires some immediate attention, especially if you feel like in the context it's causing you some anxiety. That's the thing that's most important. I would hope employees would be sensitive enough to not cavalierly have some things like that out there, but you know, this is a workplace and people sometimes don't show the best judgment. And I'm going to actually ask the chief if he has anything he wants to add on that.
What I would say is I've actually had a case like this about 1.5 years ago with a county agency. I think the most important part was, yes, the person was displaying pictures of weapons. In this case, it was someone who, for lack of better terms, some maturity issues, and very much into hunting and very much into different aspects of that. And it was not meant to be a threatening way, but the employee and the management over there did the exact right thing. They asked the police department to come over. We had an opportunity to talk our way through it. Ultimately, there was a conversation with the employee to sort of find out the background behind this, and once he was made aware of it, he discontinued the activity. However, if we had a similar like situation where it became more aggressive or more threatening, we would work with that department to look at what our options might be as far as whether it's becoming disruptive to the workplace or some other avenues. But I would encourage you, if you have a case like that, to call us and give us an opportunity to do an assessment on it.
Good. Mark, we're back to you because the couple of questions here that again intersect. The first is, how do you intend to achieve a balance between open government with easy access for all and the current security needs? Will the public still feel welcome in the building if they encounter armed police officers and such? And then somebody is also asking about the installation of glass that separates employees from the public for front desk activities.
Okay, so this sense of balance, which I think is important, as we are concerned about security, we do not want to move to a situation where people cannot come and interact with their government. And I think that right now we're trying to calibrate that balance. I will just give you a few examples. Since last week, when we've had a police officer at Bosman, do I think that that's upset the balance? Actually, I think it's improved the balance about public access. I've heard from the people sitting at the front desk in the lobby and also from people who've come in and interacted with residents. They've seen some circumstances. There was a situation where an individual right outside the building was wearing a gas mask and carrying a backpack. And in that, without a security presence, normally I think that would have scared some people away from coming into the building. An employee went right to the officer and reported it and was able to take care of it. So I think that it can work actually to increase the sense of welcoming and security. Remember, we do not have a platoon of police officers. This is one person who is trying to add something. And again, we cannot provide perfect protection. So we're going to keep working at that and make sure that people feel welcome at the same time with providing them some sense of security. This question about glass, I will sort of start with it. I'm going to see if the chief wants to add anything. We have a number of people who directly deal with the public every day, sometimes out in the field where they don't have the opportunity to have any sort of physical barrier between themselves and the people they're working with. We also have people right now in the treasurer and the commissioner's office who receive payments from people who do have some protection. And we have a number of people who are dealing directly with customers who do not have any sort of physical barrier. I will tell you that at this point, and I'm going to ask Anita also to add something because she looked at this, we are not anticipating or planning to move to a situation where every employee is behind some sort of glass. I think that actually would be overdoing it. That's my take on it. We're willing to hear from people if they feel differently about it. I think that would be a big change in the way things are being done. I'm going to ask Anita to answer this because she handled this question directly at her workplace.
All right. Well, when the Department of Human Services moved into the Sequoia Plaza facility, which was about 7 years ago, it was a topic of significant discussion. And we decided not to put in glass barriers because typically the clients who come to seek services at Department of Human Services are already experiencing some kind of trauma or financial crisis or in need of health or mental health services. And we felt that it was important to maintain sort of a more physically direct contact and approachability between the client and the employee. So far, that hasn't seemed to be a problem because we have folks who are trained in looking, keeping watch through the lobby areas on a regular basis. If they see something suspicious from the get-go, they will contact a security guard for assistance or their supervisor. People actually have little cards in their fob holders with the numbers of the security guards written down so they can contact them immediately. We feel that we have to maintain a certain amount of openness between the employees and the public in our particular arena.
So what I would add to the comments from Anita and from Mark is The most important thing here is no matter where you are, whether you're working in an office environment or you're working out in the field, that you have some sense of a plan of action. And to Mark's point, for those that work inside of an office building, make sure you have good communications with each other. If you start to anticipate there's some level of a threat, remove yourself from that situation, move back from the glass, and have a good communication strategy to notify us. But for a lot of folks, as they noted, they work out in the field. So the most important thing you can do out there is keep good communications when you go out in the field. Let people know where you are, what you're doing. And at any time you start to feel uncomfortable in a situation, and I fully agree with the county manager, I'd much prefer that you step out of that situation, create some distance, and seek some additional resources or ways to help you with that. Anytime you start to, as he said, if your gut's telling you don't be there, don't be there.
So we got a question from S, who I think is asking a question that is sort of fits within some of the shifts and the greater emphasis that we're putting on this topic. And the question is, have you considered a chief security officer who could oversee all of the changes that we are contemplating or have already put in place? And Mark, you've discussed this a couple of times already.
Right. So I am I'm going to have a point person in the manager's office. I'm looking for somebody on detail to do it. And I don't think we're going to call that person the chief security officer. I think we might call him or her, we'll need to come up with a name, because it's not just about physical security. It's also the focus on mental health and the circumstances around how supervisors are handling situations. So I know a lot of the questions so far have been about steps we're taking to physically secure the workplace, but the answer will be there's a lot going on here. It cuts across many departments. Having a point person to focus on that is absolutely something we're going to do. And I just want to drive home the point again. It's not just about the physical security. It's about the mental well-being of the workforce and the population. The situation in Virginia Beach is tragic, and I would say that the best way, perhaps in hindsight, we'll find to have dealt with the situation was not through physical security, but through increased attention to mental health. So the answer is yes, and it's going to be broader than security.
Good, thank you. Tara, I'm going to go back to you for this question. What does one do when the threatening behavior is coming from the immediate supervisor or manager?
We would encourage employees to go to the next level supervisor, and certainly the EAP is always there as a resource to help you figure out a plan. HR is also a resource. So the bottom line is you should not feel like because it's my supervisor, I don't have recourse. You can always go above that person, go to HR, come to EAP. Let's talk about a plan for helping to resolve the issue that's concerning.
Good, thank you. And we got a question from Jana, who asks, what are our options with threatening customers on the phone? I'm reading that to mean the customer is threatening. Anita, your folks deal with a lot of folks through phone contact.
We do. Well, there's sort of an approach based on severity of the kinds of conversations that are occurring. I would say the first thing is to try and de-escalate the conversation and demonstrate to the client or the person on the phone that you're an ally, that you're understanding, that you understand to the best of your ability their situation and the difficulty that they're encountering. Of course, similar to what Chief Farr said, if it's abusive language and threatening language, I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, I'm sorry, the tone of this conversation has gotten out of hand, and I'm no longer able to continue. I'm going to hang up now. You may call back at a different time when you're in a calmer state of mind. The third thing I'd like to say is that if there is a repeated behavior of abusive language or emails coming from the same individual, those issues should be reported to the supervisor, to the bureau chief or division chief, and you can also submit those kinds of online emails and complaints about phone calls to the non-emergency police. Actually, you can do it even via email, and they will at least have a record of what's going on so that they can have to demonstrate that there's a continued pattern of behavior coming from a specific individual.
Good, thank you. Mark, we have a question regarding what types of drills do we do or plan to do. And I think it's safe to say, based on some of the previous conversation we've had, this is not an enterprise-wide practice of doing these kinds of drills. We do exercises around tornadoes and earthquakes and fire drills. What thoughts do you have about drills for these kinds of emergencies?
So I would say that there isn't one place where I can go as manager and find out how often drills are done in each of the specific facilities. So that's something we need to work on, pull the information together. And in this building, I know that at least on a semi-annual basis, we do an evacuation drill. We need to, I think, do more of that and determine how we're going to incorporate that across a number of facilities. We're also taking a look at, and I think, Jim, you could speak to this a little bit, how we actually do evacuations and trying to bring some equipment where there are special chairs that we need for improving our ability to evacuate. A lot more in the way of drills. And also, separate from drills, and I'm going to ask you to speak about this, Jim, there's the question of not actually going through a full-blown drill where we evacuate floors, but what happens if there's a situation specific to a small area where you need access to some sort of device or you need some sort of equipment? And I'll let you sort of add to that.
So the first thing that I would talk about is that some employees have already taken advantage of a class that we developed here in Arlington, and it is actually getting some national attention. It's called Until the Help Arrives. And this is the idea that citizen bystanders can actually do more to affect good outcomes in incidents of trauma or violence. Though the professionals will always be responding, via a 911 call or their awareness, it is really the bystander that can provide the most amount of assistance. So Until the Help Arrives teaches people what exactly to do. It sort of counters a lot of the information that's been passed along over the last couple of decades, and it's really useful training for both the workplace and your private life. So look for future offerings of those courses. We are having conversations with public safety, communications, and emergency management around how they can add to the number of those classes being offered. And then subsequent to that, we are in the process of planning for the installation, sad as this is to say, the installation of boxes that will be strategically located throughout our workplace. They will have each of these boxes will have in them equipment to be used should we be the victims of one of these kinds of horrific incidents. So equipment like tourniquets, equipment like compression dressings, the kinds of things that, again, citizen bystanders would be trained and have access to immediately while our emergency services are responding. Look for those to be located probably close to where we have already deployed automatic external defibrillators throughout our facilities, and then look for them also to be associated in the location with evacuation chairs. So if we have to get people out of a building and they're not able to move on their own, they're not ambulatory, then those chairs would help, again, citizen bystanders to assist folks in that regard. Tara, I'm going to turn to you for this question because I think it's an interesting question and I believe right up your alley. How can we do this? How can we harden our buildings, amplify our security with, as the questioner asks, with joy, and fortify facilities as positive places to be?
That's a great question. So part of it, I think, is really looking at what's going on in your workplace and understanding what the concerns are, working with your supervisor and HR to develop the environment that you're looking to have. If you are in a customer-facing position and you end up with a lot of situations where there are conflicts, you can have training on how to de-escalate people. Many people call with an issue. Those who are out of control and very upset generally have a specific concern and they just want to be heard. So often there's language you can use to de-escalate people and help them. So we can provide training to help you with that. Each individual needs to work on their own well-being and develop their resilience. We can talk about how we build team relationships to improve the workplace environment. So it's really a comprehensive approach to first taking care of yourself and ensuring you're bringing your best self to work. Secondly, it's appropriately interacting with those in the workplace that you work with on a daily basis, as well as how you interface with your customers. So it's about working with your supervisor to develop a comprehensive approach to creating the kind of workspace that you want to work in.
So I think that really highlights the idea that what we're talking about here is a lot of the human factors. We're not going to be able to harden buildings in a way to eliminate all the risk associated with the public workspace, but we can, in fact, through our work together, still create a positive and productive atmosphere.
Absolutely, and it really is every person's responsibility to ensure we have a safe and secure environment. It's not the manager's responsibility, it's every individual's responsibility. How do we work together? How do we pay attention to our environment? How do we respond appropriately?
I just wanted to add something, not quite on this point, because I know that a lot of people out there are listening. If you're hearing something here that raises a question, I strongly encourage you, to send an email to the county manager at arlingtonva.us. Because the one thing I have noticed, and this always happens in these kinds of situations, where people have a little bit of information about something that was said here, and they talk to their coworkers about it, and it tends to get amplified, perhaps misconstrued, and there's a lot of concern and anxiety. It tends to ramp up anxiety in the workplace. So we're strongly encouraging everybody, if you hear something here, you don't get a chance to have your question asked, to put it in where the transcript for this and the information for this is all going to be available, and continue to be open for questions and additional information.
Mark, we're going to stick with you for this next question because I think it touches on what you just said, but the direct question is, I have an employee that I am concerned about and I am afraid. What should I do? Okay,
so first off, remember what we said. If you are afraid, that's usually coming from a place of sincerity inside yourself, and you need to take it seriously. You should immediately talk to somebody, a supervisor, or you should call EAP, or as needed, HR, or if necessary, the police. So I would encourage you all to walk through that tick list and go in that order. And I'm going to ask Tara or Jay or Anita if they have anything they want to add about that, because they work with employees all the time.
I think certainly the supervisor is the first place to go if you're concerned about a colleague, to express your concerns and figure out what's the best plan for resolving those concerns. EAP is an additional resource for you as an individual as well as for your supervisor. So we want to look at why you're concerned, what's behind that, and then what's the best approach based upon the specific situation. Sometimes we're concerned for a wide variety of reasons. So as we drill down to what specifically is going on with this employee, then we can figure out what is the best plan for helping to resolve your concerns and to ensure that we're providing what we can in terms of workplace safety.
I'd just like to add that if by chance you get to the point in that checklist where that your real concern is that you really are fearful that this person might be in a position where he's going to cause harm to you or someone else, don't hesitate to call us, but also remember that the police department works very closely with our partners with the Department of Health and Human Services. And our goal is, it's not a matter of getting to somebody and seeing if we can arrest somebody. Many times there is an emotional or mental health crisis going on. About 80% of our agency now is crisis intervention trained. When they get down there, they can help you or the manager work through this problem and help work through, and I would generally say, in a way that we can work collectively with our DHS partners to make sure we provide the best service. So don't get hung up on the fact that if you call the police, somebody might be arrested, maybe, but there may be an opportunity for us to intercede early and just help somebody get them on the right path.
All right, Chief, we're going to stick with you for this next question, because I think this is an issue that obviously we're contending with in society, if not here, then certainly in too many places. Given the current issues of many citizens in the public calling police on people, quote, living while black, how does your advice of calling police more often avoid bias and discrimination?
Well, I think the police department is very conscious of the areas that we respond to and why we respond to a call. And there may be an opportunity where someone calls us, and you're right, there are folks that will call the law enforcement agency to come out and talk to somebody because they see somebody of color in their neighborhood. That does not mean that when the police respond out to that situation, they don't have a conversation with the individual and are very clear as to why they got the call and what the circumstances were surrounding it. And hopefully can go back and work with the individual who made the initial call. If they call anonymously, we're going to deal with the person that called us in. If they call and have an actual complaint, we'll work through that. I can understand that there be some sensitivity that revolves around that, but our police officers will take the time and they will explain to you why they came out and what the reasons were behind it to help get at least some sense around why we were called or responded.
Good, thank you. Anita, somebody wanted to follow up and asked that, if possible, you expand on how to access the de-escalation training that you spoke about.
Okay. We typically advertise training through the Arlington County Learning Center. The one called Mental Health First Aid Training is offered to the community. The best person to call for mental health first aid training, I would say, if you want a specific training offered for your department or your bureau or team, would be to contact Kurt Larrick, who's our communications officer. He will be able to get you to a specific tailor-made session, and he's at 228-1775. The TOVA training, which is Therapeutic Options of Virginia, has principally been offered to people who are already involved in the mental health field. And it is announced through the Learning Center, but we can look into the option of expanding it to more people. We have a number of staff within the Department of Human Services who are TOVA trainers and are certified to provide the training to other departments or other groups of people. And so I would also say a call to Kurt Larrick at 703-228-1775 would be a way to start the ball rolling.
If I could add one thing on the point that you raised, which is, our DHS staff are full up and busy right now doing all that kind of work. It's going to require additional resources, and I'm committed to adding whatever staff or contractor resources we need to do. We're also going to need to take a look at the continuum of training that we do. There's, I would say, the whole, having people go to a 30-day class clearly would be too much. There's some jurisdictions, Charles County, for example, requires every employee in the county to have some level of training. I'm giving that some consideration and also adding that into orientation. That's going to require some resources. I would ask people to take advantage of the resources we have now, but be patient because as efficient as I know Kurt is, and the staff is at DHS, we are not in a situation where we're going to be able to train 3,000 people over the next month or 2 months. We have to stay in this for the long haul and take a very different approach. We have had our police, our fire, sheriffs, our human services staff, and a few other selected staff focus on this kind of training. We've added training as part of our customer cares approach, but we need to do a lot more so that everybody feels at least comfortable exercising some of those tools.
So we got a question related to alerting. How do employees know that something is going on that needs their attention? Most employees should know that we have an employee alerting system. If you have a text receiving device and or email, you will get emergency notifications. It's extremely important that employees update their contact information to ensure that if they have a cell phone, that information is current so they can receive those alerts. We are also looking at some additional mechanisms to alert the workforce to something going on in a specific workplace. More to come on that, but it is some new tools and some tools that exist that we've not really broadcast or gotten employees to fully take advantage of. An example is your desk set telephone being used as an intercom, and we also are aware that there are tools out there that we can make available to alert your computer screen. So we'll be looking at all of those kinds of things so that situational awareness is really enhanced if we have something occurring in one of our workplaces. I'm going to turn to first Anita and then Chief Farr, because we got a question about, can you expand on the crisis intervention team and how to access this service?
Well, the crisis intervention training is a training that's hosted by the Department of Human Services, and it is geared for people involved in law enforcement or security. So the police department, and Jay can comment more about who's taking it at the police department, but we've also trained, for example, the Washington metropolitan area, the metro area police, Pentagon police, airport police, and it's a comprehensive training that enables people in the area of law enforcement to understand people who are going through mental health crises and how that may present itself in a crisis situation and what are the appropriate steps to take. Do you want to comment more, Chief, about?
No, I just point out that the system, the way it's set up right now, is really designed for law enforcement and sort of the unique environment we work in to better prepare officers to deal with people in mental health crisis. However, I know that there are some opportunities or programs out there that are geared more towards the civilian workforce, and I believe that we're going to explore those, and we'll be getting back what those might be.
Good. So we got a question regarding we made reference earlier in the discussion to the badging system. So we got a series of questions here, which I'll try and take on, and then perhaps others may want to weigh in. Essentially what we are poised to do, and this was in place, or this was in motion prior to the focusing event of May 31st, is standardizing the badging system across the entire workforce, and not just the badge itself, but making the badge the tool that gets access to those areas that you are permitted to go to. So right now we have a variety of different systems out there. Some people everybody has an ID card, obviously, which, as Mark said before, we want to emphasize the importance of displaying when you are in the workplace. But access is typically handled in many instances with a fob or other kind of access card. What we'll be doing is standardizing across the entire enterprise in all workplaces the same identification card, and that card will also be the card that will be put towards a reader and give you access to where you need to go. A lot of discussion in Bosman has been around access to conference rooms. So that's an example of where, if you have a conference room that you have registered use for, your employee ID will be the access card that gets you into that conference room at the appointed time, at the approved time. The access system is going to be for all employees, both full, part-time, temporary employees. And one of the things that this and a host of other issues have really given rise to is that we don't have the best of onboarding and offboarding systems. So this is actually an area that very much relates to safety. In the form of the question here, it had to do with, well, what do we do with the dismissed employee or the employee that is separated from employment. And so what we envision is some kind of process that would immediately deactivate the access capabilities on that ID card. Even if we don't retrieve the card, we would take it out of the system and use that as a way to prohibit people getting access back into those portions of the building that may have restricted access. As for how we do this in other buildings, that's all going to be, I think, more up to the different departments to meet their service needs, and that'll be one of the discussions that we have with them. And then the last portion of this question had to do with the use of metal detectors or magnetometers, as you see at the airport, people having to go through a detector in order to get in the building or get to a certain portion of the building. We actually had that discussion probably about a year ago. That was something that we evaluated. I think it connects very much with the question that was asked earlier about the openness of a government building and providing access to the people that we serve. And the determination was made that a magnetometer is not going to dramatically increase our safety and security, but it certainly will be sending a different kind of signal in terms of openness and access to government by the people that we serve. So this is where we try and, again, focus everybody back on the security measures that we are looking at implementing, and at the same time, practicing vigilance, practicing, as Anita likes to say, empowering the workforce to take the right answer or take the right action, rather, whether it's asking about somebody's legitimacy to be in a particular space because you don't see an ID card on them, taking care not to letting somebody get on an elevator or get into a restricted space when you're going through it if you don't recognize them or they're not properly identifying themselves. This is really about us just taking the practices really to influence in a proactive but still positive way about the safety and security of our incident, or our workplace, I'm sorry. We are dwindling on the number of questions here. We've got a couple others that have come in, including one I think we touched on before about in a situation with an active shooter, can you text 911? Chief, you want to talk about that just a little bit?
I believe you can text 911 to the Emergency Communications Center. However, I would suggest to you that the more effective way, if you can do it, is to make that direct line phone call. And part of the reason for that is, while the texting gives some heads up to that, the ability to call ECC and give them information is critical for the responders to get a better sense of what they're getting into and what their proper and appropriate response would be and where they're going to go. So I know ECC has very limited capabilities right now with the text 911, but again, I would really encourage that you use your phone and give them a call on that emergency number so we can really get a good situational awareness of what we're coming to.
Yeah, I think when we first rolled out text to 911 a couple of years ago, Public Safety Communications and Emergency Management, their messaging was call if you can, text if you must. So certainly if you're in one of those situations in which your safety is at risk, texting is a useful option. All right, we are out of new questions here. I'm just checking back to see. So I think what we'll do is, in our few minutes remaining, is first off let all of the viewers, everybody who has texted in, know that, as we said at the beginning, we are creating, this information has been captured and it will be shared through SharePoint here very soon. What you'll be getting is an email directing you with a link if you want to go back and follow up there. And as Mark indicated earlier, if you have follow-up questions, you can send those questions to the county manager's mailbox at arlingtonva.us.
Jim, there's one thing I wanted to add before we do that, before we wrap up here, which is that people may have additional questions that they want to ask, and as we said, the mailbox is one way to do it. Another way to do it is I've always been making myself available to meet with small groups with a brown bag lunch. I'm happy to get together with groups. I will be spending some time not only meeting with groups of employees at various buildings, but this is the summer, so I'll be getting out and talking to employees in the field, a lot of whom don't have the opportunity to participate in sort of this give and take and have direct conversations with them. But again, you should feel free to reach out to anybody you see sitting here on the panel and say, can you come over and talk to us for a half hour or 45 minutes about something, and we'd be more than happy to do that.
I'd like to add something also for the community as a resource. If you or someone that you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, we have a 24/7 hotline, and there are staff available 24/7, mental health therapists, at 703-228-5160. We refer to that section of our department as emergency services. We have trained and licensed clinical therapists who can help that individual with whatever crisis they're going through. We also have a warm line right now, which I don't know the number of course, but for substance abuse issues and folks who would like to speak with someone in a confidential way, we have established a warm line where peer specialists, people who have experience in substance use disorders and are in the process of recovery or have already recovered, will provide you with a warm, listening person who will guide you towards resources that are available to address your needs. The phone number is on posters everywhere, but it doesn't come to mind right now. I'll get it for you. And
perhaps we can include it in the email that
yes.
We have the link back to the SharePoint
yes.
site for this. All right, looking to wrap up here and closing remarks from everybody. And Tara, I'm going to start with you because, this subject tends to bring out in us, the pessimism, our concerns, but obviously EAP is a great resource for us in terms of, as has already been mentioned in one of the earlier questions, the positivity of the work that we do together. And so I just thought I would give you the chance at the first closing remarks.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with every business group to help provide safety and security in the workplace. On an individual level, we encourage employees to call, to not wait until they're in crisis. If they have concerns or questions, to give us a call at extension 8720. We are conveniently located in downtown Clarendon in the Marshall Building, 2847 Wilson Boulevard. So we also have on our website an opportunity to ask an EAP professional a question. So you can go to that section, type in your question, you'll get a response from one of our professionals. So we encourage everyone to give us a call, find out what resources we have available, come and visit. We provide a warm, welcoming environment to help you focus on achieving good well-being.
Good. Chief R.
So for closing here, the only thing I'd like to point out is that you're going to get a sheet that has some information. It's a safety, security, and preparedness sheet. It does have links to the employee alert system, so if you've not signed up, I greatly encourage you to. It also has a link for what Mr. Schwartz or Jim Schwartz mentioned about until help arrives. They'll get you when the classes are. Plus, the police department has dedicated resources that are going to be available to business community and to those out in the government community for the active shooter programs that we do on an ongoing, recurring basis. So Captain Wayne Vincent of the police department is a point of contact for that. I'll make sure it gets on the info sheet. So those are available to you at any time. And I would be remiss to not at least take this opportunity to say, probably the most important thing for us is that you have really good awareness of your surroundings and what you're doing. I see many times I walk around the county with people heavily invested in the cell phone and the earbuds on. I would encourage you to put that aside during the work hours so you really know what's going on around you. So take advantage of that and understand you have the resources available as needed.
Anita.
Well, I think I'd echo my colleagues here. The most important message is do not suffer in silence. If you're experiencing a mental health or other kinds of emotional crises, reach out to your colleagues, reach out to emergency services at 5160. If you see something, say something. Follow your instincts. They're typically the best guide, but then take advantage of the trainings that are available, of the protocols that have been established. Refresh yourself on those, and let us know also how we can improve the workplace, because it is a place where that we believe is sacred for you, and we want it to be welcoming for our clients.
Mark, over to you.
So I want to thank everybody who joined on the panel today, and everyone out there who's been working on a lot of these issues. I did want to make sure to let everybody know I've actually had a conversation with each of the county board members. They have made it clear that whatever resources we need by way of security or by the counseling and mental health part of the equation, we will see our way clear to it. I, again, want to emphasize what everybody has said, to have a sense of personal empowerment here, which helps to deal with the anxiety. I think it's really important. I will let you know, for me personally, I have taken the Until Help Arrives class. As much as it was unsettling, I know how to stuff a gauze bandage into a wound. We've done the Run, Hide, Fight training. I'm going to be signing up for some of this other training. I encourage you all to do that. And just as a final point, this is a work in progress. We're going to do the best we can. We will continue to welcome your input and your thoughts, and wanted to let you know that we take this as seriously as you do, because we're in the same place you are. We're all in the workplace and the community together. So I wanted to thank everybody for all the hard work they're doing. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jim.
Well, again, we want to thank everybody for participating this morning. One last time, if you have further questions, or if you know of people who weren't able to participate today that have questions that weren't asked here, they can send them to county-manager@arlingtonva.us, and all employees will be receiving an email with the link back to the record of this conversation, so that they can take advantage of this dialogue. We thank you all very much for participating today and for what you do in service to the county and its citizens every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.